What's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the vlog. Thanks for pressing play. Today we have a C7 Corvette Z06, a C8 Corvette Z06, both with a Z07 package, both with an automatic. We're going to go over a question that I get pretty often. Should you buy a C7 Z06 or spend a little bit more money and get a C8 Z06? Let's go over why each one of these cars is really awesome and why neither one is a bad buy. All right, guys, so what we're going to start with is kind of a pros and cons thing. So what we're going to end up doing here is really a review of both vehicles. You guys know I've done a review of the C8 Z06 in the past. It actually got a lot of views, like 250,000 or so. I want to also review the C7 Z06 because, believe it or not, I've never really reviewed one that I can recall. I owned one for about a year, but never really did a lot of reviewing style things with it. But in this case, the cars are so similar, we're going to be doing more of an apples to apples kind of thing, whereas in the past I've reviewed this next to my ZR1 and it's not quite the same thing. So with these two, we both have very similar specs, with it being Z07, or in my case we'll say Z07-esque because it is the Z07 kit, just not a Z07 suspension, whereas Dana's car here is an actual Z07 with an automatic transmission made up with the automatic transmission of the C8 Z06 as well. Dana's car here is a 2016. It is a shark gray exterior Z07 package car. It has really beautiful E5 wheels on it. You guys know we've talked about Dante at the Supercar Saturday show just recently, but he's the one that hooked us up with the E5 wheels on Dana's car. We've done a lot of carbon fiber exterior mods on his car as well as my C8 Z06. So these things are really, really well matched up at this point. Now, Dana and I have also had a couple trips to Mexico, and I can tell you, my car is a hair faster than his, but it's not by much. You're talking about roughly half a car at most. And both cars are very capable on the track, of course, with the Z07 suspension on this car. And even the non-Z07 suspension on this one is still really good for track use and even just daily driving. Obviously on the C7 Z06, we get a 6.2 liter LT4 engine with a supercharger on it, putting out around 650 horsepower, whereas the C8 Z06 is a naturally aspirated 5.5 liter flat plane crank, putting out 670. So a hair more horsepower on this one, but this car here weighs a little bit less. So those horsepower numbers kind of are a wash with the difference in weight. The biggest determining factor between the two as far as speed is concerned is the transmission, of course. The dual clutch transmission in the C8 Z06 is going to outshift the torque converter transmission here in the C7 Z06. That's really the difference between the two as far as performance is concerned. Now, with Dana's car, you can also tell it has the torch red calipers. It has the really light gray interior. We're going to go over all this stuff, but I just wanted to kind of give you some of the options that the cars have. It does also have the carbon flash painted side view mirrors. We recently installed the AWE exhaust on this car, so both cars have AWE exhausts. Literally, they're almost perfectly matched, just about 7 or so years apart in the manufacturing date. So 7 years really separates these cars because there is a generation in between. So which one of these should you buy and why? That's what we're going to talk about today. I can tell you the C7 Z06 is a great car for the money, but let's go over why you might want to grab one of these or why you might want to save up a little bit more money and grab one of these instead. All right, so we're going to start with the C7 Z06, guys. These can be had right now for a really good price. You can get a C7 Z06 without the Z07 package for high 60s, low 70s. With the Z07, you're going to be mid 70s, high 70s for a car very similar to this. Now, usually the sweet spot for the Z06 is a 2017 because they increased the cooling capacity, especially for the automatics, and they did a couple little things with adding different options to the interiors and stuff like that. So best bang for the buck is going to be a 17 or newer. In this case, it didn't really matter too much because the 16s also still had the soft closed trunks and the front cameras and things like that the 15s didn't have. So you got a lot of good stuff with the 16s as well. It's just the 17s took it a step further with extra cooling. But in this case, I want to go over Dana's options one more time because, again, I just want to make it very clear this is a very, very good matchup between these two cars. Shark gray exterior, which was only made until 2016. So the shark gray is still to this day one of my favorite grays on a Corvette. Outside of that, we got the torch red calipers, the light gray interior, and it is a 3LZ with a Z07 package car. Like I said earlier, he does have the AWE exhaust, the E5 wheels, so very similar kind of setup to what I have on my C8 Z06. Now, why you would want to consider this car over the C8 Z06. The big one is going to be availability. So you can get one of these cars relatively easily. I could go down to my local dealership and odds are good they're going to have a C7 or two sitting around waiting to be sold. To get the Z07 package car, it's going to be a little more difficult, but you can find them online pretty easily on like cars.com, Car Gurus, that kind of thing. You're going to find a good bit of these kind of cars. Then haggling on the price a little bit because it is an older car, you're going to be able to get one for pretty much what you want to pay for it, as long as it's in that price range I discussed earlier. Outside of availability, you're still getting a 650 horsepower car, very track oriented, carbon ceramic rotors if you go with the Z07 package, a really nice aero kit setup, which in the Z07 kit setup, it's somewhere around 400 to 450 pounds of downforce that the extra Z07 kit creates. So this is a very much so performance oriented car. You guys know I own a C7 ZR1, and really the ZR1 takes this car and kind of puts it on steroids as far as the aero is concerned. But for the most part, it's the same car underneath all that stuff. Now, in my situation, my ZR1 is a manual transmission, which I think is really the sweet spot for the C7. Personally, if I were to buy a C7, it's going to be a manual transmission. But I wanted to do the review with his car specifically because it's an auto, and so is that. So there is no difference in anything really drivetrain related except for where they put the engine. So why would you consider this over that outside of availability? Maintenance. So basically, if you want to do the maintenance yourself, this car is going to be a little easier to maintain than the C8. Now, mind you, the C8's not difficult to maintain. It's just slightly more involved, and it is definitely a little bit more expensive. So with this particular year C7 Z06, you can use regular Mobil 1 5W30, which is extremely cheap to buy. You could get the high performance 5W30 for roughly $60 for 10 quarts. The oil filter is somewhere around $6 to $7. So you can do an oil change on this car for well under $100. The transmission doesn't really need much service at all, unlike the C8 Z06 that needs a filter change every now and then. The rear differential of this car is super easy to change. The transmission fluid, if you do decide to do it, is easy to change. A lot of the maintenance on this car is easier because it's not mid-engine. Another reason to go with the C7 over the C8 Z06 would be price. It kind of factors into the number one reason of availability because the car is a lot more available, but it is also cheaper. So if you wanted to get the Z06, like I said, with the Z07 package, you're going to spend roughly mid to high 70s on a newer Z07 package car, whereas you're not even going to touch a C8 Z06 for that cost. You're going to still be well over $100,000 to get even just a base model Z06. So price-wise, these are definitely a more attractive option. So the next reason why you might want to consider a C7 Z06 over the C8 Z06 is the engine placement. If you're a big front engine kind of guy, this is really the last of the Corvette that is probably going to offer something like that. Odds are very good the Corvette is never going to go back to a front engine drive if I had to guess. So the C7 is pretty much it, especially if you want a manual transmission. The C7 really is it. Odds are very good the Corvette will never see another manual transmission, and even if it did, it's not going to be on a front engine platform. Another reason would be cargo space. So the C8 Corvette in general has a good bit of cargo space, but the way it's broken up is much different than it is on the C7 Corvette, and the C7 has this really open area in the rear hatch, whereas the C8 kind of takes that same amount of area but chops it in half and puts half of it in the rear and half of it up front in the frunk. So this one, you can fit a lot bigger items in, and you can do a lot more kind of traveling if that's what you wanted to do. There's a lot more cargo space for those kind of things in this car. The interior of the car, quality-wise, is just a hair under where the C8 is, in my opinion, but it does feel slightly roomier in the C7, even though the cubic feet in the C8 is larger from what I can tell. It doesn't feel like there's more room in the C8. It feels like there's more room in the C7. Now, like I said, both of these cars are really well matched. So both of them have very similar options, even outside of just both being Z06 with Z07 packages. Both of them have removable target tops, so even if you don't want to go with a convertible, you can still pop the top off of either one of these two cars and enjoy the sun or enjoy a nice sunny drive. Both of them have crazy good performance. Both of them have insanely wide tires to put that performance to the ground. Both of them take 93 fuel only because of that high performance, so that's another kind of determining factor here. If you want to daily drive these things, 93 gas gets expensive. Both of them are very, very well designed for aerodynamic purposes. Both of them have functional aero that really help keep the rear end planted at high speeds. And honestly, both of them are fantastic looking cars. All right, so moving on to the C8 Corvette Z06. Why would you want to get this car over the C7 Z06? The biggest reason, and this is going to sound weird, but the biggest reason to get the C8 Z06 over the C7 Z06 is because it's new. A lot of people out there are going to feel, that's kind of a weird reason, but a lot of you guys are going to agree. You get newer tech, you get newer design features, you get newer everything. So when you get in this car, it's new. Whereas the best you can do with the C7 Z06 at this point is buy a used one. That's not necessarily a great reason, but it is a reason. So the second reason I would offer for the C8 Z06 is because of the power plant. So you got the 5.5 liter flat plane crank, naturally aspirated, and it is putting out more power than the C7 Z06 with a supercharger. So naturally aspirated car, of course, is going to run cooler. It's going to do better on the track because of its ability to stay cooler without that supercharger adding extra heat. So this is more track oriented to some degree because of the naturally aspirated engine. Depending on where you're at with looks on these cars, you either love the C8 look or you love the C7 look. I'm kind of right down the middle. I really appreciate both cars for their design language, and they look so different that it's easy to have both in your life and not really get bored or prefer one or the other. So like I said earlier in the video, I do have a C7 ZR1, and I can't tell you that I like the ZR1 better or worse than the C8 Z06 here. I think the design language, the performance, the way they drive is so different that the only way you can really respect both cars is to own both because they're so different. Now that kind of factors in here too with the C7 Z06 and the C8 Z06. They're both just very different cars, and we're going to take them for a drive here in a little bit to show you why they're different. The biggest difference, of course, is going to be the cross-plane 6.2 liter supercharged versus the flat plane 5.5 liter naturally aspirated engine. It's just two very, very, very different driving feels. Another reason you may choose the C8 Corvette Z06 or the C8 platform in general is the amount of mods available. I mean, there is literally nothing that you can't find for this car. As you can see here, my car was just a Z06. I did not get the Z07 package on this car, but I added all of the Z07 aero after the fact, and there is no shortage of carbon fiber add-ons in this car. There's no shortage of aftermarket wheels, aftermarket engine dress-up parts, aftermarket exhausts, aftermarket cat deletes, catalytic converters, interior pieces. I mean, you could literally spend the rest of your life modding this car and never get bored. There was less mods available for the C7 Z06, but if modding is your thing, the C8 platform is where it's at. Again, with the looks being kind of subjective, some people think this looks a lot more like a supercar than the C7 does. I am on that side of the fence. I do believe this has a more supercar-esque appearance about it. But at the same time, if you look at the Ferrari F12, I believe it was, it looks very similar to a C7 Corvette as well. So no matter how you cut it, these both look very Ferrari-esque. But in my opinion, this has a slight edge on that because it is the mid-engine setup. Just gives it more of that supercar look because most supercars are mid-engine. Another reason you might choose the C8 Corvette over the C7 Corvette is the interior quality. Like I said earlier on, the interior quality of the C8 is a hair better. And honestly, when I say a hair better, I really mean a hair better. I've heard a lot of people discuss the interior qualities of both of these cars, and a lot of people out there make it sound like the C8 has a far better interior quality. I would not say it's far better. I think personally, the C7 was the one that really just exploded with quality after the C6 Corvette. But then after that, the C8 kind of just improved marginally. So it is a better quality interior. It's nicer put together, we'll say. But at the end of the day, you can't go wrong with the C7 Z06 interior either. They're both very nice. So if you want that absolute top-notch, cutting-edge technology, Ferrari-esque look with a flat plane crank, this is your car. You're going to spend a lot more for it though. Like I said, you can get a Z06 for high 70s. You're not going to touch one like this, especially a Z07 package, for less than probably 150 to 160. And that's with the current prices as of September 19th, 2024. So these prices could change, of course. They could go up, they could go down. Most of the time they're going to go down at this point because they are kind of making more of these cars. But this is kind of my high overview of both of these cars. You can't go wrong with either one. but there is a little bit more performance advantage with the C8 Z06. There's a little bit more quality, and there's a little bit more of a cutting edge tech to this. So if you're the guy who needs that most recent tech thing, this is going to be you. If you're okay taking a step back and using something like wireless adapters to make it so you can have wireless CarPlay and stuff in your C7 to bring it up to date as far as the technology is concerned, you can really still get by with this car. I mean, I hate making it sound like it's old, but as far as technology is concerned, you know, technology gets old quickly. So this car by itself is an amazing buy for the price, and you can easily get some of the tech inside the car up to date to kind of mirror what you're going to get with this one as well. And then you still have your front engine with a possible manual transmission option. You can't go wrong either way is what I'm ultimately trying to say here. So let's go for a drive. I want to kind of show you guys the difference in the way these cars drive, because there is a little bit of a difference, especially in the way they sound. And we're going to give you some exhaust clips on both because both have the AWE exhaust. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the driving aspects. C7 Z06, AWE exhaust. So here we are in the C8 Z06. Gotta add a little bit of air to one of my tires, but we're good. It's not that bad. So we're gonna kind of go for a drive here and show you, really just let you hear it for the most part, because the driving experience is very different, and honestly, you're not really gonna be able to tell as much as just what I'm telling you, but the Z06, the C7 Z06 feels more cruiser-esque than this car. This car feels like it was built for the track. Now, if you guys know what a Z06 is typically, especially in the C8 lineup, this is the track-oriented car. So it's going to ride more like a track car, but it's truer for this car than it is for the C7, it seems. So we'll go into manual mode, roll down the window here a little bit so you guys can hear why the flat plane crank is so cool. That's why it's pretty cool. Now, obviously, like I said, horsepower-wise, we're at pretty much the same. The cars are very, very, very similar on power, 650 versus 670. But the C8 Z06 does it naturally aspirated with that sound. Yeah, so sounds really awesome. But it does handle itself pretty well as well. So obviously it is the track-oriented suspension. So if we were to go hit some road courses with the car, it's going to do very well. It's going to handle its own pretty nicely. And there's a cop, so that's always fun. But anyway, so the C8 Z06, track-oriented, sounds amazing, drives really nicely. It could easily be a daily driver. It is a much stiffer suspension than what most people would want on their daily driver, but I guess I'm kind of crazy in that aspect because I like when a car rides like a sports car. So I would prefer this kind of ride out of a car. But I do know the C7 Z06 seems like it's a little bit softer, especially in tour mode. It felt a little softer than this. Would you say this ride's stiffer?
Yeah.
Yeah? So we'll know here in a second whenever we jump into the other car. But for the most part, you guys have seen a lot of this car on my channel, so I don't want to kill too much time here with the C8 because you guys already kind of know this. The C7 Z06, I want to see exactly how it compares here. It's been a long time since I've driven a C7 Z06, so I kind of know what the experience is going to be like, but it's definitely going to be different than this. I personally feel like this car rides a little bit stiffer, and honestly that's interesting because his car is the Z07 suspension, whereas this one is not, but this one feels a little bit stiffer. Now, I do have this one lowered as well, so that could possibly factor into it. But either way, that's pretty much the drive for the C8 Z06. Like I said, the interior of this car is really nice, but it's really nice on the C7 Z06 as well. So we're gonna go ahead and head back, pick up the C7 Z06 and see what kind of differences we can note. The interior of this obviously is very livable for a daily driver, so if you're looking for something that's maybe a hair more comfortable as far as interior is concerned, maybe the C8 is the way you want to go. But let's get back to the C7 and see what that one's all about. And here we are on the C7 Z06, guys. I can tell you one thing right off the bat. It is significantly easier to get into this car. So the competition seats in the C8 Z06 are a little more difficult to get into than the GT seats here on the C7 Z06. So even the competitions in the C7 Z06 were flatter. There wasn't as much of a bolstering as there is in the C8 Z06. So if you're looking for a super race car seat, you're going to get it more so in the C8 than in the C7. So anyway, we are in sport mode. This is, like I said, an automatic. Let's take a drive. I've only ever driven one C7 in my entire life that was an automatic, and it was not this one. So this is the first for me. The throttle actually seems more responsive in this car than in the C8. That's weird. So you guys heard the exhaust a little bit ago. I'm going to roll down the window here just a little bit so you can hear this one though as well. This is your typical V8 with the AWE exhaust. So very similar viewing experience. The C8 might have a little bit of a, I guess, a pro in that section because the front end is not as long as the big V8 hood, but it's not much. This is still a really, yeah, this is a pretty rough riding car too. I guess they're about the same. I thought this one felt a little softer initially, but this is it still rides like a sports car, of course. I'm trying to get it a little rowdy here so we can really compare it to the C8. I know that exhaust sounds good though, because it's the same one I have on my ZR1. So it really depends on what kind of sound you're looking for here. A lot of people, a lot of purists like the cross-plane 6.2 liter sound, of course, because it sounds like your traditional Corvette. But you know, some of the newcomers, such as myself, I can appreciate both. I really like both in the grand scheme. But I don't think you can go wrong either way. Like the video, I wanted to make this as transparent as possible, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think you can make a wrong decision here. I like both cars for different reasons. I think the C7 has more of a traditional Corvette look, while the C8 kind of takes it to more of an exotic level, and that's up to you if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So if you are more of a Corvette purist and you like that long front end with the big V8 and the manual transmission possibility, then the C7 is your car. I mean, there's just no other way around it. But if you want the newer fin-dangled C8 Z06 with flat plane crank and automatic dual clutch transmission, yeah, I think you guys can kind of make up your own minds at this point. But my professional, quote-unquote professional opinion, you can't go wrong with either one. And if you can, the best way to do it is to own both. But what do you think, Dana? What do you think about?
I still love my C7. Still love this car.
Out of the battle of the Z06s, I don't think there's a clear winner. I think they are both really, really, really good cars.
I think it's a preference. If you like your C7, you're going to love it.
Yeah.
If you like the C8, you're going to love it. So it's not something that you're going to... It's hard to say one or the other. Yeah. Unless you have a preference. If you have a preference, that's the one you're going to love.
They're both good, though. Like, I technically have both, with my ZR1 being, you know, obviously a C7, and I still can't tell you which one's better. So
that's going to be that, guys. Hopefully this helped you in some way, shape, or form. If you're trying to make a decision, I think the best way to make the decision is which one can you afford? Which one fits your financial budget better? Because that's the one you should get. And that's where I'll leave this video. I'm going to sign off. Guys, subscribe if you haven't, and stay obsessed.